Hi everyone, I've had lots of requests to do some work in Affinity Designer. I've had a play around with it. I've done a few drawings. I found it really complicated. I was going to do a sort of a walk you through video. It just got massive, so I scrapped that idea. What I've done is I've put together 8 tips and tricks that I think are really useful, including probably the most important thing of all, how to trace accurately in Affinity Designer. And then at the end of the video, if you stick around for that, I've done a speed paint in Affinity Designer just to show you something that you could do. So hopefully you'll find this useful. Let's get right into it. So here we are in Affinity Designer. I'm going to show you how I trace objects really accurately and 1 or 2 other tips. So I'm going to put some text on, and the first tip is you can just touch the screen and start typing away, but you have no idea how big the text is. If you put your pen on the screen and hold it there, you can size the text to what you want. So that's tip number 1. And then I'm just going to type the word trace because we're going to do some tracing, okay? And you might say, why are we tracing lettering? I can just type it in. You're absolutely right, you can. But the reason I've chose text is if you are tracing lettering, it has to be accurate. So I thought that would be a good way to demonstrate this way of tracing. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm probably only just going to trace 2 letters, otherwise you're going to get bored to death. And I've got some black text. You'd use we used to trace logos and things like that a lot, so that's why we were doing the tracing, and it was way more accurate than any other sort of automated system we could use. So I'm going to choose the pen tool, and I'm going to set the color. I'm going to switch the colour off, and I'm going to have a red outline because the red outline will show up nice against the black. And I don't want to fill in, I just want it to be an outline at this point. So let's do the straight edges first. If I just tap and tap and tap, this isn't actually very accurate. Let's start again. I did say it was supposed to be accurate. So I'm just touching the points, and if you touch a point, you just get a straight line. Now, I'm sure most of you will be fine doing this bit. It's when you come to doing the curves. So right, now we're on a curve, and this is where it gets tricky. Zoom in, and if I touch and keep my pen there, I can create a curve. But the secret thing about this is, where my pen is, always keep the pen on the shape you're tracing. So as I'm moving around, you can see the pen is on that shape. I never let it leave the shape. I can put the straight lines in again. You see how accurate that is. Make sure the pen stays on the edge of the shape. What I mean by that is don't let these little markers, handles they're called, come out of that or off that line. Keep it to the line as best you can. And sometimes you might get it wrong. I didn't quite touch it there, but so you could press the delete key by tapping twice and then redoing that. There we go. I'm still not happy with that because that looks all right, but if I try and do that one, it's getting tricky. So I'm going to try and I'll do a shorter line. There we are. And I'm just keeping, still not quite right. There we go. There we are. And I can shrink that up, touch that up for there. So if I want to just tweak it, say I've got things that aren't exactly right, I can choose the node tool, which is the second item to select. And I noticed that that wasn't quite right, so I can grab a point and just move it just to finish it off and fine tune things. Look at the curves. I can, if I think, right, I want to delete that curve, I delete it because I've got too many in. I deleted too many there. I can grab the handles, these little points, and line them up. Just to get that nice and curved. So that's one way of doing it. I can then I could fill that shape in if I wanted. Let's colour it in. And I'll turn the outline off. So that's the first letter done, and that's drawn really accurately. So that's how you can trace in a really accurate way. I'm going to show you another way. If you find that way a bit daunting, there's probably an easier way than that, but it might take a little bit longer. I'm going to there we go, and I appear to have an outline on my traced object. Let's just switch that off. There we are. Okay, so the second way, I choose my pen tool again, and this time it starts off pretty similar. I just got the straight edges in, I zoom in, but this time I just do straight edges, and I'm ignoring the curves at all. And I go straight to the node tool, and by clicking or touching the center of a line, have I got the node tool selected? No. Touching the center of the line, I can just drag that out. To make my curve like that. In fact, you might find this way faster. There is, in actual fact, a tiny bit of a curve on that as well. Just level that up a bit. Select the move tool and fill that in. Well, I'll turn the outline off first, fill it in red. And now we've got two letters drawn, so I can move my original text and delete that. So you wouldn't trace lettering, really, to be honest, unless you hadn't got the font, I suppose. I've done that before, but that's how you trace really, really accurately. So let's have a look at one or two other things you could do. I might want to put a shape inside this text. Let's deselect everything, change the color. I'll have blue. I'll choose the drawing tool. I'll select this object. Not doing very well here. select the object, insert inside. Now I'm going to try and draw. And basically I'm just drawing it at some sort of random shape. I'll have to fill it in. Oh, there we go. And it's filled it inside that letter T. I'll just tidy that up because that was annoying me. So, and I can now select that shape and move it inside the letter T. But what happens if I've got two objects that I want to have a fill in? Say I wanted it to go over the T and the R. How do I do that? Right, let's just, I'm going to layers to select the shape I drew, and I'm going to delete that. If I choose the add to select option down here, because I've got the move tool selected at the top, choose add selection and select the T and the R. If I then pull down the three dot menu, there's an option under geometry that says add. If I add that, I've now got one object, that letter. If I click off, oh, I've got to deselect, add to select. If I click off and then just tap the R, you can see I've got them both selected. So if I choose insert inside again, choose my drawing tool, draw a shape that overlaps both of those. I've now got that shape inside both of those letters. So that in actual fact is tip number 4. I guess we've had 2 drawing tips, how to resize the letter, and how to maybe 4 or 5, how to merge. It's ticking on, we're getting a few. How to group 2, well, not group, because that would be just sort of grouping 2 objects in layers, but how to merge 2 objects together to create one object, and then how to place an object inside another object. And once you've done that, you can move it around as you want. We could add a blend on that, and to do a blend, whatever node you've got selected, you can change the color. So we could have a nice sandy color at the bottom there, and going up to this one, we could make it more orange perhaps. So we've got a blend going off like that. I can adjust the amount of blend by moving the slider like that. I can also put, say, an outline on this object by choosing the outline tool, changing the width of that. We'll make that white. Oops, I've changed the blend. Didn't mean to do that. Let's put that back to orange. I meant to choose the move tool and then choose the outline and change that to white. And I could change the text to blue, and it's changed the outline again. Change the text to blue, and we've got this kind of technique that they used to do a lot in the 70s for doing this sort of chromey effect over lettering. I could put an outline around the lettering as well by selecting the lettering, putting an outline around that. These aren't really tips now, I'm just sort of showing you what you could do with some. Oh, here's a useful tip. Now if I let's make that well, I'll leave it black for now. If I make a nice thick line around that, you lose the lettering. How do I get the lettering? I want to see the lettering, not this big thick outline. So if I choose advanced, and then there is this option here that says order, and that means, do you want the outline on top or do you want the lettering on top? And you can see we've got the outline selected, so if I tap that, then we get the lettering on top. So that's a useful tip. And I always like to scale with the object as well. Okay, so that is another tip. So I've now got my one object with some that I've traced with some another object embedded in that, and then an outline where the text is on top. What happens if I draw, say, a circle, and let's colour that in yellow, and we'll put a red outline on it for, we could say this is going to be the sun, can't we? Oh, I meant to draw it inside there. How can I get that in there without deleting it? It's dead easy. All you do, you go to layers and you put your cursor or your pen on that layer, drag it over the top of the object where you want it to appear, and you notice we get a blue line going through the middle of it. Take your finger off, and there you are. That's now embedded in that shape. So I can resize that as well. And the cool thing about these objects is, if I resize the text or stretch it, the shape inside also scales with it. So that's really cool. We could put some arrays around this sun, I guess. So if I draw or select the sun, and the reason I've selected that, if I choose a rectangle and draw a little rectangle, say down here, draw a little rectangle, what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn the outline off first of all. By choosing this circle with a cross through it, I can, I'm going to fill it in red. Oops, still on the outline. Fill it in red. Zoom in a bit so I can see what I'm doing. It's not, sometimes my iPad does, I don't know if it's getting a bit old, it sort of lags a little bit. So I can make a stroke like that. Now this is quite a useful tip. If you duplicate an object, well, you can do it one of two ways. You can hold your two fingers down and drag a shape like that, and then that will duplicate it. I'm just going to move it like that and then choose duplicate. It actually remembers where you've moved it to and then duplicates the next one in the same way, and we could go all the way around, although this is a bit pointless because you're not going to see them. So I could select that one and duplicate that one again and just twist that way a little bit. Again, you're not going to see it though, so it doesn't really matter. That's how you can duplicate an object and get it to position itself in the same angle or position or whatever. So it's a good way of repeating an object very, very quickly and getting the same distance between them and so on. So that's another quick tip. So that is it. I think that is the end of my quick introduction to Affinity Designer for absolute beginners. The real point of this video was to show you how to trace accurately, because that's what a lot of people struggle with. But I thought I'd just throw in a few other little tips and tricks as well. So that's the end of the tips and tricks. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm going to leave you with a speed painting done in Affinity Designer. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, big thumbs up as always, it's much appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, because I've got lots of videos like this and I would love to be sharing them with you. So hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.